Hey everybody, welcome to another Backyard Professor video. The t-shirt today is Marvel Comics, my heroes. We are fighting for truth and justice. Because we see periodically from time to time. Now, this doesn't happen a lot, which is very fortunate. But we see young Earth creationists say that dinosaurs are mentioned in the Bible and that Noah's flood destroyed the dinosaurs. Now, we have to be charitable to that type of, in this day of scientific analysis, and I get it, there's a lot of people who mistrust science, and yet they continue to drive cars, watch their televisions, and get on their computers. So the irony is thick in that, right? So they don't send signals by smoke fires up on top of the mountains. They use their cell phones. Strictly based on science, of course. But this claim is very interesting because they say Job talks about the behemoth. I believe it's Job. I've got the reference. The behemoth in Job 40, verse 15. Yes. The Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew and English lexicon, which is dated. I get that. I understand that. I do believe the Halot, the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament, also has this entry basically more or less. They claim it's the hippopotamus and that it is in Egypt. And there are various ancient authors who describe this behemoth mentioned in the book of Job as existing in Egypt. So that's the one of the Hebrew lexicons. The other one is Strong's, and I understand Strong's is dated also. I'm fighting a cold tonight. I don't know where I got this cold. I apologize. But the number 930 in the Hebrew section of the Strong's Concordance is Behemoth. Now, Behemoth is also mentioned in the creation account in Genesis 1. And it talks, those are just large beasts. And so behemoth sources variously identify as the hippopotamus, the crocodile, the elephant. The plural form may indicate this is the ultimate creature, a composite description of the strongest attributes of the animal kingdom, behemoth. And so there has never been excellent Hebraists through history ever say they were dinosaurs until young Earth creationism rose its head, right? So this issue is very interesting because there is now a claim, and I have not looked into this in any type of detail. I'm not quite sure how far back this claim began, so forgive me for being ignorant of the history, but the claim is that dinosaur bones have been radiocarbon dated to between 4,000 and 10,000 years old. And so, of course, there is a conspiracy with the scientific establishment to destroy the Bible, to refute the Bible, to make the Bible null and void. And everyone knows dinosaur bones are millions of years old, not just a few thousand years old. So, of course, the young Earth creationists scream conspiracy at the top of their lungs. That's what I want to respond to tonight, though. What is this idea? Where are they getting this idea from? And I've gone to Quora, and I will read a few of the questions and a few of the responses to help us get our bearings on this, what I consider to be a very interesting issue. How do creationists usually justify that carbon dating and other scientific techniques have shown fossils to be millions of years old? A lot of people think that creationism, or what is called intelligent design, is merely an assault on the biological sciences. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, they just ignore or question science they don't like. That starts at radioactive dating, goes on to geology, then goes after comparative genetics just to get started. And here's a very important clue here. They've also questioned astronomy, generally not the Big Bang, but usually the size of the universe, paleontology, anthropology, and comparative anatomy. This doesn't stop at the biological sciences, of course. It questions chemistry and physics as well. Now, I consider myself scientifically literate. I was a good science student in high school, went on to study astronomy in university. The stuff is incredibly difficult, etc. And I could measure the half-life of uranium-235 in my apartment. Rutherford did that a century ago. But it's easier to accept that someone else did it and trust their result. I just assumed someone else double-checked. But the best lesson, he goes on to talk about astronomy. No, I'm not going to worry about that guy. He's talking about astronomy. He's mad. So here's what happens with fossils. He's mad at the young Earth creationists. I don't want to get into that. I'm not mad at anybody. I want to broaden our minds so that we understand why this issue is so sticky with so many millions of people. Most of today's knowledge of fossils, ages, comes primarily from radiometric dating, also known as radioactive dating. And this is a very important distinction. It's not radiocarbon dating. It's radioactive dating. Now, radiometric techniques may not always be the absolute dating method for fossilized bones. This is because fossil bones incorporates new radiocarbon by means of recrystallization and, in some cases, bacterial activity and uranium decay. Because of this, bone mineral, fossil or otherwise, is a material that cannot always yield an accurate radiocarbon date. Mesozoic bones consistently yield a falsely young radiocarbon date of a few thousand to a few tens of thousands of years, despite the fact that it is millions of years old. This is not a conspiracy. This is simply one dating method among many dozens that we have at our disposal in order to properly date old things. The young Earth creationists only want to focus on the radiocarbon dating as if that's the only one that works, or that is the only one in existence, and nothing can be further from the truth. Young Earth creationists claim that radiocarbon dating in dinosaur fossils demonstrates that the dinosaur fossils must only be thousands, not millions of years old. This is clearly not the case, because, as demonstrated by radiometric dating with radioisotopes, that is, radioactive materials now, other than carbon-14, and we can test this with uranium-238, uranium-235, and potassium-40, found in neighboring layers of Earth, including igneous rock, such as volcanic ash. This information has also helped to determine the age of the Earth itself. And we've also made improvements to the standard radiometric measures through practice, of course. When you practice the piano for 20 years, you're a lot better than you were your first year. That's how that works. So, another point that comes along, I apologize for my cold. We don't want to talk about a rich person doing investments. How do scientists explain DNA being found in dinosaur remains when they age the dinosaurs at millions of years? That's impossible, right? I mean, it is pretty astonishing. It's an amazing situation, right? Science is an incredible, interesting, enlightening thing to use. They don't, however. And here's the important point, because no dinosaur DNA has ever been found in any fossil. What has been found were traces of collagen, one of the most durable proteins in the animal kingdom. These were chemically analyzed and found to be most similar to collagen from the family of birds that give us chickens. Not terribly surprising, given that it's long been suspected and is now generally agreed that the modern birds are in fact dinosaurs. Well, here's another question and the response. In Cora, If carbon dating is said to be accurate for up to 500 or 50,000 years, then how can it be told that dinosaurs roamed around millions of years ago? That's a damn good question, because sci-fi and others seem to think that carbon dating is the only dating game in town. It isn't. To get a date fix on really old objects, say let's go back millions if not billions of years, the only way to get a close approximation is to measure the minute amount of radioactive material in the sample. And these chemicals, they give off particles as radiation. Now, some do it quickly and some do it more slowly. That's called That's what a health physicist does when they use a Geiger counter. They are detecting those radioactive particles, right? Chemists long ago figured out that in a given amount of time, half of the substance becomes non-radioactive and half remains radioactive. The time it takes to reach the 50-50 quantities is called the half-life, and it is precise enough for us to tell if something is 1 billion or 1.1 billion years old. So, and then he gives an example. I'm not going to go through that. And I'm not going to worry about that. By the way, carbon dating is commonly used in archaeology because of the many fields objects of studies are less than 50,000 years old. For paleontology, though, you need more formidable radioisotopes. Which site is the best site to earn money online? We're not interested in that question. We're not interested in that question either. Here, and this is an interesting point, too, that we need to begin to understand how fossils work. How can dinosaur bones be millions of years old when simple internet research on bone decomposition proves otherwise? Because the dinosaur fossils we dig up today aren't actually bone, they are stone. The biological material the bones were made of decomposed and were slowly replaced by minerals carried in by water over millions of years, bit by bit, until we are left with a natural cast and filler made of two different kinds of rock. Very interesting. Can scientists be sure that the fossils are billions of years old? If they could, would that not disprove the Bible's accuracy? So this is getting back to the biblical concern. First, most fossils are not billions of years old. Some are, but these are from Western Australia, and they're bacteria, 3.4 billion years old. Many fossils are younger than that. All known fossils of animals, for example, are younger than 600 million years old. Fossils include any trace of formerly living organisms up to and including the seashells washed up on the beach today. And I know paleontologists who study those, so some fossils are in fact quite young, for sure, but we're quite sure that the history of life on Earth can be traced back 3.4 billion years. Everything alive today, from blue-green pond scum to Tom Cruise, is a product of that long and winding history. That basic fact hasn't been seriously challenged, although, of course, many of the details are not well understood. We get all that. That's true. But the basic information is there in the solid. The main way that we can calculate these immense ages is through radiometric dating. Again, keep that in mind, not carbon dating. Carbon dating is just one type of radiometric dating, and it only gives accurate dates back to about 50,000 years or so. Most rocks that can be dated radiometrically are dated with different techniques, and the fossils become rock. That's why they aren't radiocarbon dated. That's really the important point to take away from this. Instead of trying to explain the whole thing here, there's an article on radiometric dating. You can look it up on the internet real easy. And he goes into Charles Darwin and James Hutton and Lyell, etc. Does that disprove the Bible's accuracy, though? Well, it disproves the accuracy of one particular way of reading the Bible. Now, that's a fair statement, as far as I'm concerned. When I was very atheistic leaning, I read a lot of atheist materials, and it dawned on me that they did not have the final answers, but the good that they did is they were able to demonstrate that some assumptions using some interpretations were false. That's the value of the atheist viewpoint. If you insist that the Bible is to be read as a book of facts, in which every single event must be an accurate description of something that really did happen, with no margin of error, well, yes, science disproves that interpretation of the Bible. And when I say disproves, I mean it stomps it into the ground like a herd of rampaging triceratops. That battle was over years ago, and those who are still trying to fight it, well, they remind me of the Black Knight in this famous movie scene, and that's the night where he says, "Oh, it's only a flesh wound." It was in the Monty Python. But that way of interpreting the Bible isn't a very traditional one. It wasn't the reason why the authors, the editors, and scribes who created the Bibles did the work that they did. They were not trying to record historical facts with perfect accuracy. See, we're reading our own assumptions of how we do history, of how we do science, back onto the biblical record. That's not acceptable scholarship. That idea of just the facts method of interpretation only started becoming popular with the nascent fundamentalist movement in the late 19th century. So it's a late comer, and we do not have to take that approach. So I would argue that that way of reading the Bible as a book of facts and only facts kills most of what's interesting about it. I would agree with that author by implying that the only way that the Bible can be worthwhile is if it's factually true. It kills the poetry, it kills the mythology, and the beauty and the drama, better than Richard Dawkins may dream of. You end up getting tangled up in, say, the minutiae of how to reconcile Genesis 1:1 through 2:3 with Genesis 2:4 through 2:25. These are two separate accounts of the creation of the earth which contradict each other on major points. Instead of appreciating both of them on their own terms, however, as variants of the same myth, and this happens all the time. How many different versions have you read of Little Red Riding Hood, sincerely, or Cinderella, right? So instead of appreciating both of them on their own terms as variants, these spoke to different people at different times in history. And Richard Elliott Friedman's book, Who Wrote the Bible, may help you out here. And that's a very good book. I would also recommend that. So the 3.4 billion year history of life on Earth is as securely established as anything in science. Now, whether that disproves the Bible's accuracy, that depends on how you read the Bible. Yeah, many Christians accept the Bible as the foundation of their faith, and yet have no issues at all with the immense age of the earth. Figuring out where you stand on this issue, that's your own journey to walk. So, and one more I do believe. Oh, here we go. A statement. A creationist used carbon-14 to date dinosaur bones to 40,000 years old. So does this prove to them that the Earth is much older than 6,000 years old? Or will the creationists still say that the 40,000-year-old date is wrong and that carbon-14 means nothing? And I like this analogy. He says it's kind of like trying to date the Vesuvius explosion using the body temperature of the 79 CE explosion victims. Carbon dating is good to some 50,000 years back. Roughly, that's when Homo sapiens reached the Europe and maybe the Americas. Before that, the carbon dating is basically useless for the same reason the carbon dating is used. It is rather accurate in this time scale because of the 5,700 years half-life of carbon. There's the key. That doesn't change. So while this lets you date fairly recent events fairly precisely, it's not useful past that line. And worse yet, it needs biological material. And dinosaur bones are not bones. This is another idea we need to grasp, They are minerals. This is the idea of how fossilization actually works. The biological material is replaced. It's replaced by minerals, becomes rock. So even if he used the carbon-14 correctly, he used it on an incorrect target and probably measured some contaminant. More likely, he did not use it correctly on an incorrect target and mutilated the results to fit his agenda. So, and that's all I have. I mean, there are many more. Yeah, how do creationists explain the presence of carbon-dated dinosaur fossils? There are no carbon-dated dinosaur fossils. If you think you are mistaken. Carbon dating is good to 50 to 55,000 years maximum. Dinosaurs almost completely died out over 60 million years ago, except for the birds. Carbon dating is really good for recent human remains and things like charcoal and firewood. It's totally unusable for dinosaurs. So this is we don't go to radiocarbon dating, whether it's carbon-14 or otherwise. We go to radiometric dating, and we utilize the very natural, fundamentally understood radioactivity of certain chemicals. Very interesting. So that's pretty much what I wanted to. Yeah, and here we go with another angle on this. Christians, if science proves that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, how do you explain the existence of dinosaur fossils? See, if we had found proof of a 6,000-year-old Earth as our scientific knowledge developed, the most plausible explanation would be that those dinosaurs were killed in a sudden catastrophe. Which, interestingly, by the way, turns out to be what did happen to them, but that was 65 million years ago. So in your alternate 6,000-year-old world, I suppose there would be a tendency to start by seeing this as proof of Noah's flood, which is what the young Earth creationists try to do. Maybe the 6,000-year humans would keep investigating and find traces of the killer asteroid. Maybe not. So it's a very interesting and reasonable way to discuss the idea of science. You Christians who are continuing to teach that the Bible does mention dinosaurs sincerely, with all sincerity, you are not doing your cause any justice. You just really aren't. You're wrong. You're wrong both in the Hebrew, in the Septuagint Greek, all of the various commentators throughout the millennia who've had those scriptures, and by the sciences. There are numerous different ways to test aged things on this earth, not just radiocarbon-14 dating. It would help, and there's some people who, you can look this up on, you can Google it. There are dozens of different methods to find how something is old. If one method doesn't work, we can cross-check it with another, and we can either confirm or refute that, or using another method, we can refine our measurements, etc. It's a very sophisticated process, and it's not because scientists are out to disprove the Bible. The difficulty with the conspiracy mindset is it shuts your brain off to further light and knowledge, and that can't be a good thing. So my advice is quit thinking there's only one way to interpret the Bible, and broaden yourselves to read other types of analysis of biblical literature and mythology, and compare it with some of the ancient archaeological discovered literatures that we have, the Gilgamesh epic, the Enuma Elish, some of the ancient Egyptian materials, the coffin text, the pyramid text, the Book of the Dead, the Book of Breathings, etc. Because through a comparative analysis of the literature, you begin to see your Bible in new ways that you'd never thought of before, or only that which you've been taught in church. So good luck in your research, but understand There is no dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible. You're just simply wrong on that score. Thanks for watching.